In Star Trek Online, there are numerous missions that can be repeated daily that are scattered across the quadrants, but there are also a number of unrepeatable patrol missions available only to Starfleet characters. I will be covering all of these missions in due time between the main story content drops, alongside the other missions such as the Task Force operations and leftover tutorials. The STO map is also divided into the Alpha and Beta quadrants, with the Sol system, Vulcan, and others sat in the beta side of things. I've always interpreted this as simply a way to have all the faction homeworlds in one zone, and that the first stretch of sectors along the western edge of this map are technically still in the Alpha Quadrant, keeping the majority of these systems in line with canon. That, or they slightly withdrew the borders in the 25th century, but I could find no mention of this in the lore. So, to begin with, we set a course for the far corner of the Beta Quadrant map, which I still consider the Alpha Quadrant territory, to look for the Iridian Belt. This is a star cluster spanning off into unexplored space on the fringes of Federation territory, where the Romulans also have shown an interest in exploring. There are occasional missions into its depths, heading closer to the galactic core, and Romulan miners have uncovered Elachi beacons on planets here, but otherwise the area remains a mystery. You can assist in charting and colonisation through assigning your officers to missions. But aside from that, beyond this point, there be dragons. So we turn away and start heading to our next destination. A scattering of darkened rocks against the black of space is hard to spot, but this is the next system, the Chimenera system, and it's been recently explored but has had no further information on it, suggesting there's nothing of interest here. Or perhaps lots of things of interest that have all been blacklisted. The Ponor sector, where we currently are, is only 2 sectors away from Sol and surprisingly unexplored, although there is a heavy Romulan presence here. The Ponor system is the name giver for this area and holds 2 planets, one of which is a Class F planet with an extreme atmosphere and volcanic activity, complete with Class 4 seismic disturbances, which can ignite the hydrogen compounds in its atmosphere. Not a great place. There's an automated Starfleet presence here, outposts for the occasional away mission to the planets that are usually unmanned, but mostly it's a listening array in orbit of Ponor 2. Unfortunately, this listening array has been tampered with by a Romulan presence, probably the Tau Shi'ar. They've basically repurposed them to be transmitting their recorded data back into Romulan space. Now, these satellites are not exactly uncommon, and the decision is quickly made that simply destroying them would be more efficient than trying to repair them or undo the Romulan sabotage. Unfortunately, the Romulans have left a number of Talis warbirds in the system to defend their handiwork, so we have to dispatch these first. The battles against these small birds of prey are short and we destroy our compromised satellites. However, there is a single Duridex class vessel in the system as well, which proves to be more of a challenge. Eventually, we prevail and drive out the Romulan presence. We then send a message to the Starfleet Corps of Engineers requesting replacements of our communication arrays in this system, and we can move on. The Rashana system is next up, and this is formerly Star Empire territory, but with the loss of Romulus in 2387, Rashana declared its independence, but retained its trade ties with Nova Roma, the capital of Rator III and the seat of the dying Star Empire. Perhaps it's these ties that spared its sealer's boot, because she's made no attempt to attack, invade, or liberate, in air quotes, the system from its independence. Next up we have NCG-1218, which used to have a more prominent role as an outlet for a Hirogen-made wormhole, and we go there once to search for the USS Griffin crew, only to find that they've been captured by the aforementioned Hirogen. This mission is no longer playable. It also holds the remains of 16 Starfleet vessels and their crews that were destroyed in a battle against Nero and the Narada. All around, not a system with a pleasant history. Moving on. Brashar was to serve as the home system along the Federation side of the neutral zone to act as a front for the Romulan evacuation in times leading up to the destruction of Romulus. These efforts were abandoned by 2390, however, but there is a Federation outpost here around Brashar Prime called Outpost Quebec Alpha, which now houses a Vulcan Science Academy team for research and study of the planet below. There is also a patrol to do in this system. They need our assistance. Basically, it seems that Riemann extremists have moved in an attempt to seize the system, especially Quebec Alpha itself. From here, they could then stage attacks on other colonies along the Federation border. Now, they're also not in Riemann vessels, but converted Romulan ones. We engage the Mogai warbirds and are forced to destroy them, before moving on into the system to secure our outpost. The Romulan evacuation was helmed by Admiral Picard between 2382, when Starfleet learned of the threat, and 2385, when the fleet that Utopia Planitia had been making to complete the mass evacuation was destroyed by rogue synths. I guess spoilers for Picard here in the next 20 seconds, but it was not rogue synths, it was Tal Shiar, or Zhat Vash, sabotage, turning Mars's defences against the planet itself. This ended Starfleet's grand plans for assistance, as they saw it as a possible prelude to further attacks from an unknown enemy and turned inwards more and more, favouring defence. In the meantime, the Star Empire was being all paranoid about its evacuation, claiming that the imminent supernova was Starfleet propaganda, also while trying to evacuate the important people it could from its territories. Romulans at times. This has left many worlds as unfinished projects for the Romulan relocation and evacuation programs. Over the next 30 years or so, many of these worlds have stabilised with their own colonists, and many declared themselves independent, or part of one government or another, such as the Romulan Free State. It wasn't until Datan's efforts in 2409 that unified these disparate colonies under the banner of the Romulan Republic. He also made a place for the Riemans, who, let's not forget, also lost their homeworld too. But it seems like not everyone is happy with this arrangement. With the Riemann raiders driven off, we touch base with Quebec Alpha just to make sure everything's okay. Finding that it is, we're able to leave and go to the next system. We move south now, heading deeper into core Federation territory and into a new sector. The Teneebia sector, and our first stop is the Demel system, which, aside from a ringed planet, has nothing of interest. So we pass on through. The Elvren system, which is an amazing sight, has a Class L planet, but the system is shrouded in micro-nebula. These nebula are home to unique electromagnetic lifeforms that are considered protected by the Federation, and traffic around this system is limited. Similar creatures were encountered by the USS Voyager in 2376 in the episode The Haunting of Deck 12. The unusual lighting around the system reflects off our ship's hull, casting it in a very seldom seen light. While the colours seem to be a bit more muted, all the contrast seems to also be turned right up, and you can see all the Aztecing of our hull. Unfortunately, we are not here to appreciate the stellar view. We have also detected unusual readings coming from one of the planets in the system, so we're going to have to investigate. This is, after all, a protected zone. The signals appear to be coming from the planet ahead of us, so we close on in and prepare an away team to beam down. Immediately on materialization, we can hear an awful humming sound and see the source of our strange energy readings. There are generators, 5 of them in total, sporadically placed around the desert. An L-class world itself is one that is habitable, but not suitable for humanoid life. In this case, it's far too barren and dry, and the vegetation here is not edible. It does not mean, however, that you could not establish a base on this planet and have resources imported to it, which may be what we are looking at here, a sort of prelude or failed attempt to establish a colony, and the generators have been left behind? Let's have a closer look at them. Well, a thorough scan reveals them to be, surprise surprise, Romulan in origin. We're not here to dismantle or disable them, we were just here to investigate the cause, so after taking some readings of them, we're pretty much done. We do manage to discern that they are rather new, so presumably they were set up as a precursor to a Romulan outpost in Federation territory, but either they gave up or we caught them in the act. After all, there's not a pointy ear in sight. Except for Temet. As for this area itself, it would be a good location for a small settlement or colony or outpost, The overhanging rocks, shaped by the wind erosion, provide excellent cover from any elements as well as prying eyes from above. It's a shame that they do nothing to mask the energy signatures of their generators. But maybe we should have a little colony set up here to watch the nebulas and do some studies. Next up is the Teneebia system, which is home to the namesake planet of Teneebia Alpha and a Federation member world. It was the testing ground for the 2409 transwarp experiments that sought to recreate a miniature version of the Borg transwarp network. Interestingly enough, Teneebia Alpha is not actually a planet but a moon. It is accompanied by a second moon. The planet around which they once orbited is now just debris. The Ikari system is next on our patrol. Ikari Prime is home to the mines of Ikari crystals, which are luminous green and favoured by Romulan artisans. There's a small factoid here that says that the largest Ikari crystal ever found was turned into a statue which now sits in Emperor Seela's palace on Nova Roma. Once more, this is a beautiful system surrounded by some amazing displays of stellar gases, which casts the Armiger in a strange light. There is a request for Federation aid within this system, so we step on in to have a talk with the locals to see what's up. Turns out, nothing too major. There are a bunch of rogue asteroids that have entered their system and been captured in the gravitational orbit of Ikari Prime. Nothing too drastic, they just want us to analyse them to make sure they're not actually going to be a threat, because they might have their orbits degrade with time and pose a danger to the planet. Our scans, however, reveal something amazing and unexpected. Upon the surface of these asteroids, foreign to this system, we find the wreckage of a Federation starship, the USS Fleming. It does not specify which USS Fleming this is, only that it was lost in 2387 with the destruction of Romulus. However, it could be the NCC 20316, which is a Wambundu class light cruiser. It seems that the wreckage made its way onto these asteroids, which have then drifted for the past 30 years and finally entered this system, being captured in the gravity well of this planet. Very interesting. Let's scan the rest of these asteroids and see what we can learn. As we go, we stabilise the orbits. These asteroids won't prove a threat to the planet below, fortunately, but just in case we will keep tabs on them. Temet also digs up the files on the Fleming to see what we can learn about it and its fate. It looks like it was part of a medical convoy heading for Romulan space, but was attacked by Nero and the Narada. It looks like they even attempted to launch life pods, but there were no survivors, no one to report the tale. It looks like the wreckage, and probably some of these escape pods, made their way onto these asteroids, and then drifted into the system. Well, at least we've found what happened to the crew of the Fleming. As Commander Tarsi says, no Starfleet ship or crew should be forgotten out here, and it will be a comfort to the friends and family of the fallen to know that they've been found at last. With that unexpected discovery out of the way, we're free to leave the system. Our next stop is Eris 3, another Federation colony world that welcomed displaced Romulan refugees. The colonists here are mostly those relocated from the Cardassian border in the late 2360s, so they were no stranger to being displaced and welcomed the Romulan people. Unfortunately, opportunistic raiders have set about stealing the supplies that were bound for this colony. In this case, it's more remnants. There's going to be nothing complicated about our response. We are going to go into the system, find the Riemann ships, drive them off and reclaim their stolen cargo. However, there are more ships than there initially appear, as the minute we engage one, 2 more decloak nearby. Fortunately, they are all Talis light warbirds and not really a threat to the Armiger. We move around orbit of the planet, freeing up the cargo. It can stay here until it's collected by the colonists below, and we move on to engage the rest of the Riemann forces. The final stop on this tour of systems is crossing just into the Vulcan sector and entering the system of Wolf 359. It should be an unremarkable system around a small red dwarf star. However, in 2367, it was Starfleet's first conflict with the Borg. It saw the loss of 11,000 Starfleet lives and 39 ships, as well as the death of Admiral Hanson. The loss was chalked up to the assimilation of Captain Jean-Luc Picard and the tactical intelligence and information that the Borg assimilated through Locutus, the drone he had become. Of course, the grim task of salvage has long been completed, but many of the hulks and damaged components of starships, Borg and Starfleet, remain here, floating alongside a monument to those lost, and a reminder that space exploration isn't always without risk. Thank you for watching this episode of the Star Trek Online story series, where we are examining the lore and locations of Star Trek. There is plenty more to see, so I will be resuming these fairly often alongside other content to be announced. Thanks for watching again. I aim to do all the patrols, task force operations and tutorial missions, but perhaps not all in concurrent order. I might take a break from these to do something different. But until the next episode, I've been Rick. Goodbye.